I would never have imagined that my husband Javier could make such an unexpected proposal to me. We had been married for 10 years, a decade of ups and downs like any couple, but always with a complicity that made us feel proud of our relationship. Our union was based on trust and the freedom to share everything, or at least, that's what I thought until that night. It was a quiet autumn evening. The rain was gently tapping on our living room windows, creating an almost melancholy atmosphere. Javier and I were curled up on the couch, each with a glass of wine, chatting as usual. We were talking about light topics until, suddenly, his tone became more serious. "I have something I want to propose to you." He began by looking into my eyes. His expression was hard to read, almost nervous. "It's a bit of an unusual idea, but I think it could put a twist on our intimacy." I smiled at him, curious, but also a little worried. "What is it about?" Javier took a moment, searching for the right words, as if afraid of saying the wrong thing. Finally, in a calm but firm voice, he said, "I would like to see you with another man." For a moment, I was speechless, my mind filled with confused thoughts. Was he serious? Was he joking? I looked for signs of irony in his eyes, but found none. "What'd you say?" I asked, trying to buy time to process. "It's not because I don't like you anymore. On the contrary," he explained, trying to reassure me. "I want you as much as the first day. But I think that experiencing something different could make us stronger as a couple." Those words left me stunned. I didn't know if I should feel annoyed, bewildered, or simply incredulous. I looked at him silently, unable to formulate a proper response. I tossed and turned in bed as his proposal echoed in my mind. I felt confused, but at the same time, a small spark of curiosity was beginning to ignite inside me. The days that followed that conversation were a whirlwind of conflicting emotions and thoughts. Javier's proposal did not leave me calm. I tried not to think about it and concentrate on my daily tasks, but his voice echoed over and over again in my head. Every time I looked at him, I wondered what had led him to make such a suggestion. Javier, for his part, seemed determined to respect my space. He did not insist on the subject again, but his gestures and attitude showed that he was waiting for an answer. He was more affectionate than usual. He made me breakfast, left me romantic notes, and made sure I felt loved. This, far from calming me down, only added to my confusion. One night while preparing dinner, I decided to broach the subject. "Javier, can we talk about what you told me the other day?" He looked up from the newspaper he was reading and watched me carefully. "Sure, Lucia." I took a deep breath, trying to keep calm. "Why did you make me that proposal? Is it because you think we are missing something, that I am no longer enough for you?" Javier got up from the chair and approached me, taking my hands gently. "No, my love, not at all. I don't want you to think that for a moment. You're everything I've always wanted." "Then why?" I insisted, with a tone that couldn't hide my frustration. "I don't know how to explain it to you," he answered with a sincere look. "It's not out of a lack, but out of curiosity, out of a desire to see a side of you that I've never known." Those words took my breath away. I didn't know whether to be flattered or uncomfortable. Javier's curiosity seemed genuine, but that door he suggested opening terrified. That night, in the silence of our room, I continued to reflect. I wondered if accepting his proposal would strengthen our bond, or, on the contrary, open a crack that would be impossible to close. As the days went by, Javier's proposal stopped being an absurd idea and became something that occupied more and more space in my mind. I tried to imagine what it would be like. How would I feel to let myself be carried away by something so unknown? At the same time, I wondered if this was normal in a marriage of so many years. It's natural to feel the need to explore new horizons. Javier seemed incredibly patient. He didn't mention his proposal again, but his gestures and gaze showed that it was still on his mind. He watched me as if he was trying to read my thoughts, as if he was waiting for me to take the next step. One night, as I looked at myself in the mirror while getting ready for bed, something surprised me. There I was, with my face slightly tired and my hair in disarray. But I still saw something of the woman I had been when we first met. That version of me, who was confident, attractive, with a spark of flirtatiousness that I thought had disappeared over the years. That revelation made me feel something strange, a mixture of pride and curiosity. Was that what Javier saw in me? Did he want me to rediscover that part of myself that I thought was lost? That same night, as we lay in bed, I mustered the courage to speak, turning to me with that warm gaze that always gave me peace of mind. I've been thinking about what you told me. I confessed. I don't know if I'm ready, but maybe we can talk more about it. Understand what it really means to us. A smile lit up her face, a mixture of relief and joy. I don't want to pressure you to base anything you don't want, Lucia. I want this to be something you decide, something that makes you feel good. Her words touched me deeply. He wasn't trying to push me into something I didn't want. He was giving me the freedom to explore and make my own decisions. Over the next few days, our conversations became more open. We talked about desires, fears, and boundaries with an openness we had never had before. This not only eased my doubts, but also strengthened our connection. However, I still wondered if I was ready to cross that line. As our conversations progressed, the idea Javier had planted in my mind began to take clearer shape. It was no longer just an unattainable fantasy. It was a real possibility. However, every time I approached the idea of accepting it, something inside me stopped. And if I crossed that line, it would change everything forever. I began to look at the men around me differently. They were no longer simply strangers or passing figures. I wondered if, under different circumstances, I might have feelings for any of them. This frightened me, and at the same time, excited me. One afternoon, while I was having coffee at my usual place, a familiar man walked in. It was Hugo, a former co-worker of Javier's. I hadn't seen him for years, but his presence was still as imposing as I remembered. Tall, confident, and with a warm smile that immediately lit up any space. "Lucia, what a surprise to see you here," he said, approaching with enthusiasm. "There was how long?" I answered, and feeling suddenly nervous. We sat down and began to catch up. There was something in the way he spoke, in the way his eyes looked straight at me, that made my heart beat a little faster than normal. "You're still just as radiant," he commented at one point with a tone that made me blush. "Thank you," I replied with a shy smile. When I got home, I couldn't stop thinking about Hugo. It wasn't just his physical attractiveness, but the way he had made me feel. Alive, seen, desired. Something I might not have felt in a long time. That night, I mentioned the encounter with Hugo to Javier. I looked at him cautiously, waiting for his reaction. To my surprise, a curious smile formed on his face. "He's a good guy," he said, as if that phrase carried a special weight. He didn't add anything else, but his words remained echoing in my mind. It was as if he had noticed something in my tone, something I myself was just beginning to understand. After my encounter with Hugo, I couldn't stop thinking about him. It wasn't just his physical attractiveness or the way he spoke. It was how he had made me feel. That spark of excitement and curiosity that I thought was lost had been reignited. Days went by, and although I tried not to give it too much importance, every time I thought about Hugo, I felt a mixture of nerves and excitement. I knew Javi had noticed something. He didn't say anything directly, but his attitude reflected a mixture of patience, and that he was waiting for me to make a decision. One night, while we were having dinner together, Javier broke the silence. "I've been thinking about what we talked about," he said calmly. "Yes," I replied, trying not to show how nervous I was. "If we ever decide to go ahead with this idea, there might be a good option. His proposal left me speechless. Hugo, your friend? Javier nodded, keeping his calm tone. I know him well. I know he is a respectful person. And most importantly, I trust him. And I didn't know how to respond. The idea of involving someone we both knew made everything feel more real, closer. At the same time, I wondered if Javier was really comfortable with this, or if he was hiding some doubt. That night, as I tried to sleep, I couldn't stop thinking about what Javier had said. Hugo was kind, attractive, and someone I could trust, but I was really ready to take that step. The next day, Javier brought up the subject again. I mentioned something to Hugo about our conversation. He said carefully, as if he was gauging my reactions. I froze. What exactly did you tell him? I just explained that we were exploring something new as a couple, and that maybe we would include him. I didn't pressure him at all, but he's willing as long as you are too. My heart began to pound. The idea that Hugo knew what Javier and I had discussed made everything so much more real, so much more imminent. What about you? Are you sure about this? I asked him, looking for some sign of insecurity in his face. Javier looked at me serenely. Yes, I am sure, but it doesn't matter what I want. This will only work if you want it to. His words left me thinking for the rest of the day. I felt I was on the verge of a decision that would change our relationship forever. A few more days passed before I finally made a decision. That night, as we sat on the couch, I looked him straight in the eye. I think I'm ready, I said softly. Javier leaned toward me with a mixture of relief and pride on his face. Are you sure, Lucia? Yes, I answered, although my voice was still trembling slightly. But I wanted to be respectful. I don't want this to change who we are. I promise you that nothing will change between us. Javier assured. He was the one who organized everything. He contacted Hugo and coordinated a meeting at our house for the following weekend. Although my decision was already made, I felt a knot in my stomach during the previous days. It was a mixture of nerves and anticipation, a feeling I had never experienced before. When the evening arrived, everything was ready. I had prepared a light dinner, and Javier had selected a bottle of wine that I knew Hugo liked. When Hugo arrived, he looked elegant, but relaxed, with his characteristic air of confidence that made him so attractive. The evening began in a relaxed manner. We chatted, laughed, and recalled anecdotes from the past. However, as the evening progressed, the atmosphere began to change. There was a palpable tension in the air, a mixture of expectation and nervousness that none of the three of us mentioned. At one point, Javier took the initiative. We are here because we want to share something unique, he said softly, but nothing has to happen if any of us doesn't feel comfortable. Hugo nodded. I want this to be something natural and respectful. Lucia, you have the last word. Lucia, His words reassured me. I knew I could stop everything at any time if I wanted to. But when I looked at Javier, I saw in his eyes a mixture of trust and love that gave me the courage to continue. The tension in the room had become almost tangible. The silences between conversations were longer, and every glance seemed loaded with hidden meanings. My heart was beating so loudly that I felt it could be heard throughout the house. Javier, ever patient, stood up and poured some more wine. Everything okay, love? He asked me with a quiet smile. Yes, I answered, although inside I wasn't so sure. He was sitting across from me, looking at me with a mixture of respect and curiosity. I felt an unexpected connection, as if we had already shared something intimate just by looking at each other. We are here to share something special, but nothing has to happen if we are not ready. Lucia, you decide. I took a deep breath. I looked at Javier, searching his eyes for the reassurance I needed. He returned a look full of love and trust, as if to remind me that this was all about strengthening our bond. I slowly stood up and approached Hugo. He remained seated, expectant but respectful, letting me set the pace. I sat down next to him and placed my hand in his. I felt his warmth, and that initial connection became more real. Javier kept some distance away, watching quietly. His presence gave me a strange sense of security, as if his love was a shield protecting me in this vulnerable moment. What followed was a slow exchange, charged with respect and delicacy. Every gesture, every look, every word was a step towards something I had never experienced before. There was no rush, no awkwardness, just a mutual discovery that made me feel alive in a whole new way. At the end of the night, when it was all over, Hugo looked at me with sincerity. "Thank you, Lucia. This has been something special, and I appreciate it very much." Javier came over and hugged me tightly. "I am proud of you," he whispered in my ear. At that moment, I knew that what we had done had not weakened our relationship. On the contrary, we had found a new way to connect, to understand each other, to love each other. The next morning, I awoke to an unexpected sense of calm. Sunlight was streaming through the curtains, filling the room with a cozy warmth. Javier was already in the kitchen preparing coffee. When I entered, he greeted me with a warm smile. "Good morning, love," he said, handing me a cup. "Good morning," I responded, taking a sip and feeling comforted by his relaxed attitude. We didn't talk directly about what had happened the night before. We didn't need to. Everything felt in place, as if that step we had taken together had only reinforced what we already had. Over the next few days, I reflected on what we had experienced. It wasn't just the experience itself, but what it represented for our relationship. Javier, for his part, seemed more attentive and loving than ever. There was not a trace of insecurity or jealousy in his behavior, which surprised and reassured me at the same time. There was something new in our relationship, a deeper connection, a renewed trust. One night, while we were watching a movie together, Javier asked me, "Do you regret what we did?" I shook my head with a quiet smile. "No, Javier, I don't regret it." "Do you?" "Not at all," he replied, coming up to kiss me on the forehead. "I think it has made us stronger." A few days later, I received a message from Hugo. His words were simple but meaningful. "Thank you for allowing me to be part of something so special. What we shared was unique, and I deeply respect the love and trust between you and Javier. You are an amazing couple." That message touched me more than I expected. Not only did it reaffirm that we had made the right choice in trusting Hugo, but it also confirmed that what we had experienced was not trivial. It was an experience that had strengthened not only our relationship, but also my self-confidence. I showed the message to Javier, who read it with a smile. I knew we could trust him. He commented, giving me a comforting handshake. Eventually, our daily routine settled back in. Work responsibilities, household chores, and our little couple traditions took center stage in our lives. But something had changed. There was a lightness in our day-to-day lives, a sense of freedom we hadn't felt before. One day, while we were walking through the park, Javier took me by the hand and stopped me suddenly. "Lucia, I want you to know something," he said, looking me in the eyes. "Tell me," I answered curiously. "No matter what happens, you will always be the most important person to me. What we did doesn't change that, it reaffirms it." His words touched me deeply. Knowing that our love was still the pillar of everything we shared filled me with gratitude and peace of mind. As the days passed, I realized that what we had experienced had strengthened our relationship in unexpected ways. We were no longer just life partners, but also allies in exploring our deepest emotions and desires. Javier was still the same attentive and loving man I had known, but now there seemed to be an even greater complicity between us. Every look, every gesture, every word carried a special weight, as if we both knew that we had passed a test that few couples dare to face. One afternoon, as we watched the sunset from our terrace, I took Javier's hand and squeezed it tightly. We didn't need to say anything. The silence spoke for us. We knew that what we had experienced was unique and that our relationship had grown stronger from the experience. The sun was sinking into the horizon, tinting the sky in shades of gold and orange. As we watched this spectacle together, I felt a deep peace. We had crossed a border, but we had done so with love, respect, and trust. True love is not always about certainties, but about having the courage to explore the unknown together and discovering that, in the end, that journey only strengthens the bond that unites you. The story is over now, but if you want to hear other stories of secrets and lies, click on one of the videos below. Click on one of the videos you see on the screen. And remember to subscribe to the channel to receive new stories every day.